Good afternoon. My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. This little story can describe really what I really am. When I was new, somebody asked me, was playing the game, asked me what my drug of choice was. I thought, I've never been asked that. You ever been in the crack house and somebody say, what's your drug of choice? I never heard it till I got here. Right? And somebody asked me, and I go, well, I don't know what you mean. And they go, well, imagine this, Karl. Imagine I came into this room and I had a tray. And on that tray, I had a bottle of Jack Daniels, an ounce of cocaine, and an ounce of Thai sticks. Which one would you take? I started to drool immediately. Just, and I take them all. And they go, no, you can only have one. Which one would you take? So I thought for a second. I said, well, I guess I'd take the ounce of cocaine. And they said, well, then maybe cocaine is your drug of choice. Do you understand now? And I go, no, I don't. And they go, what's the problem? I go, well, the only reason I take the ounce of cocaine over the other two is, well, I take that ounce of cocaine, I'd get the hell out of here, and I'd sell 2 8-balls. I would now have enough money for a quarter-pound of Thai sticks and a case of Jack Daniels. And money left over for a cheap motel for a week, right? So anyway, when I tell you that I'm an alcoholic, what I'm really telling you is that I've got a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. That's what I'm telling you when I tell you that I'm an alcoholic. And this strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a few forms. The first part of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. A really strange thing happens when I drink booze. The book calls it an allergic reaction. And the book says the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get when I drink alcohol is what they refer to as the phenomenon of craving, meaning unexplained. They don't know why it happens, it just happens. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. It's really weird. It doesn't happen with anything else. An example of that is Ruff has been very kind in getting me water, and so I've got this bottle of water, and over the next 45 minutes to 4 hours that I'm talking with you, I know some of you just got nervous. Some guys just left the back just now. Over the next 45 minutes or an hour that I'm talking with you, I will probably drink half this bottle. I don't know. If my mouth gets dry, I might drink this whole bottle of water. But I can absolutely swear to you that once I finish this bottle of water, I am not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in a motel room. Right? There is no chance that I'll be, calling Chris later. Chris, man, I need another case. Come on. I'll turn the pink slip to Ruff's car over here. Right? It's not going to happen. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, this bizarre physical reaction that I get, this fact that I lose control once I start drinking, if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, well then, Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism, right? Early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. If that were true, I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, no, right? And just gone on and lived a happy, successful life, just saying no. But I've got this other strange part of my relationship with alcohol, and that happens when I'm not drinking it. And this is the part that anybody who loved me, cared about me, or counted on me for any reason was always baffled by. It broke their heart, it ruined their relationships with me, and broke their trust for me every time. And this is what happened, and this part of my relationship with alcohol happens when I'm not drinking. See, even by myself, if I don't drink for a day, a week, or a month, I seem to have this mind that has always been able to paint a picture to make it okay for me to take another drink, no matter what the pain, humiliation, and suffering was a day, a week, or a month ago. And it never enters into the equation whether it's my pain and humiliation or your pain and humiliation. I could care less. But sooner or later, my mind has always been able to get me to take that walk back to the next drink at all costs. So therefore, because of these two components of my relationship with alcohol, number one, I cannot drink successfully. But at the very same time, I cannot on my own not drink successfully. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 we call alcoholism. I swear, if I could do either one of those two things, I would. That's actually a lie. I have no interest in drinking successfully. Really, I don't, and I don't think you do either, because you might not know what drinking successfully is. Drinking successfully apparently is 2 drinks and stopping. See, that just makes me nervous. The idea of 2 drinks and stopping is kind of like, I'd rather have somebody screech their fingernails down a chalkboard more than having 2 drinks and stopping. right? And again, this is just my opinion, but I think this is why medical science always has sort of missed the boat with us, because they're always trying to do something to limit us, back us off. Our book politely says science may one day accomplish this, turning a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. But you see, I know they're being polite in saying that, but I've got no interest in that. See, I've got no interest in being a normal drinker. It's just not on my radar. So the only thing that medical science could come up with that might interest a guy like me would be is if medical science came up with a pill that said, Karl, if you take this pill, you can drink for 4 days straight. You can smoke as much cocaine as you want, and nobody will go to jail. Nobody will go to the hospital, and your mother will still be very proud of you, right? Now that would get my attention. Now I'd go, now we can have a conversation. Well, you know, that's ridiculous. I'm going to harp on that physical feature a little bit more because it's one thing, bar none, we all have in common if we're alcoholic. Because, you know, if you really, Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're new and you're trying to identify and you're trying to listen to people's backgrounds or what part of the world or what part of the country they go, their culture was, you might miss out, might miss the boat, because Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the most beautiful things about it is it is a wide cross-section of society. Everybody's here, every race, creed, color, religion, every type of background, every type of family background, every type of education level. We're all here. We're all here. In fact, the Alcoholics Anonymous is the only society where the bank president, the bank teller, and the bank robber are all right here in the same room. Right? And they're all telling a very different story about what just happened. So if you're trying to identify, it's hard for the bank robber to identify with the life of the bank president, right? But you see, on top of that, we drink differently than each other. If you listen to people when they tell their stories, we drink differently than each other. To illustrate that, let's imagine this. We would never do this if you're new, but just imagine this. Let's say we wheeled up right up this center aisle here, and we wheeled in this giant cart with all the kinds of booze we all like. If you're a top shelf drinker, we got it. Remy Martin, Cavassier, we got it. If you're a bottom shelf drinker, we got that too. Mad Dog 2020. Right? Whenever I say that, a couple of guys in the back always salivate. Yeah, Mad Dog. Huh? Right? We bring it all right in here, and we all take a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks. Real drinks, no umbrellas in there, no mixer, a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks. We'd all be acting very, very differently, right? Over in this corner, we'd have the good time crowd. Ah, ha, ha, talk, 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 fun, 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 drink, drink, talk, 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 add a little methamphetamine, talk a little faster, talk, 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 talk. But we have a good time over in this corner, right? Right? That's the way we respond to alcohol. Woohoo, right? Party, party, party. Over in that corner, we'd have the sobbers. You know them, get drunk like, whoa. Over in that corner, we'd have the fighters, right? You're a little drunk, got to fight, fight, fight. Over in this corner, a bunch of us would be naked. I personally would be visiting the other 3 corners, trying to find a couple of friends to come over here with me. Just kind of the way I get. So our stories are different based upon which corner we're drinking in, right? Over in this good time crowd, they get a lot of DUIs, right? They get arrested a lot out on the road because they're always going to the next bar, next party, after hours. Heading over to Joe's house, man. Who's picking up the booze? We're heading up, right? They're out on the road. They get arrested a lot. Over in the sobbing corner, they don't get arrested. They don't even leave the damn house, right? The worst they do is call you at 3 a.m. Blah, 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 blah. Or God forbid these days, drunk Facebooking, like, You don't get arrested for that yet. Over in the fighting corner, they always have probation, parole, mom paying for bail, and court dates, right? That's over there. Over in this corner, children show up by surprise. That'll change your life, drunk or sober. So our stories are different based upon how, which corner we're drinking in. But if you're like me, there's one thing we would all be doing. No matter which corner we're in, we'd all be back at that cart for another drink. 4 is never enough. It just lights the fire. And it was really important when I was new when they told me to identify that's what I was to listen for. And appreciate all the differences we got as human beings and where we grew up and where we were from. But man, if I'm trying to identify with alcoholism, I'm looking at what happens to you when you drink and use, and almost more importantly, what happens when you try on your own not to. Because if I'm listening to that, I don't care who you are. I'm you, you're me, and I can listen to anybody in the 12-step meetings. I set this relationship up I described to you right from the get-go when I first started drinking, and based upon our speaker last night and Tina today, I started late. I was 11. That's pretty late these days, right? We lived in Seattle. A typical morning for me in 7th grade would be I'd show up early for school, not for study hall thing, but to meet my new friends at the very edge of the school property, Loser's Corner. Every school's got a Loser's Corner. It's 10 feet off of the school property where all the kids would hang out before school, smoke cigarettes, and try to look cool. And we would also have what I like to call the playground cocktail. That is a jar full of whatever we could rip off out of the parents' liquor cabinet the night before. And that jar is pretty scary because none of us 11, 12-year-olds have been to bartending school yet, right? And plus, when you're ripping off the parents' liquor cabinet, you're in a hurry. You're not sitting there measuring drinks out and, trying to figure out what's a Harvey Wallbanger. You're just throwing anything in there, right? Whiskey, vodka, cream de menthe, vermouth, all in there. And you're bringing that jar to school, and we're all 7 in the morning choking that down. I know they started early, huh? Yeah. You missed it. I got to start again. My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. Right, you can imagine 6 or 7 of us, 11, 12-year-olds choking that stuff down in the morning. Of course, it was the early 70s, so we're smoking that commercial pot. Anybody remember that stuff? 4-finger lids, $10 a bag, seeds and stems and the whole bit. And it was even before Ziploc baggies were invented, when it would just be a regular Glad sandwich bag, and as you'd roll it up, there'd be like 9 people spit on it. Oh, man. And we'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves into a homemade pipe, maybe made out of plumbing fittings and a screen. Or if you're really desperate that morning, it would be a toilet paper roll with aluminum foil and pinholes in it. Were you guys there too? Yeah. That's why you're here. I got to tell you, I know that this is I guess we can call this a poly-cross-addictionalist type meeting. We don't care. But, isn't it funny in meetings, in AA meetings, where they get all upset when you start mentioning drugs? And I've always thought that was really kind of funny when an alcoholic, they start getting nervous when they share and they say things like, I don't mean to offend anybody, but drugs are a part of my story. Right? I got to tell you, the funniest example of that I've ever seen, I was in this big meeting in West Los Angeles back in the 90s, right? And this speaker was up there just giving one of the most nasty, heinous, blow-by-blow drunkalogs. And I got to tell you, the uglier the story gets, the more excited I get. And I was there in the front row, like drooling, going, yeah, buddy, go. And at one point in this really ugly story, this guy goes, I had 4 DUIs, and the judge said if I get one more DUI, I'm going to prison. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I'm on the freeway in a blackout. I hit a family of 4. They all wound up in the hospital, and I wound up in prison. In prison, I sodomized men. I was sodomized, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I did some drugs too. It's like, everybody's kind of going, yeah, whatever, buddy, that's okay. So anyway, by the time I'm 14 there in Seattle, I'm the neighborhood drunk, I'm the neighborhood pot dealer. I forgot to mention, but my father was a neighborhood Lutheran minister. He didn't find anything funny about this at all. My parents, really good people, right? And well-intentioned, but this is the mid-'70s. They didn't understand. They didn't know what was going on with me. I would have been an adolescent being thrown into adolescent treatment centers. That's what would have been happening in the last decade or two. Back then, they didn't understand I was alcoholic, and they blamed my problems, and rightfully so, based upon misunderstanding. They blame my problems on people, places, and things. They think if we can get them away from that group of kids he's hanging out with, things will get better. Get them out of the public school system into the private school system. Maybe things will get better. They tried all of the above. You see, I'm an alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, places, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol and drugs. You see, you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. So by the time I'm about 17, almost 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle, and my parents decided that Seattle was the problem. It's the whole city's problem. If we can get them out of Seattle, things will get better, so they sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and in that 3 years, I almost got 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content. about a .25. I did nothing at that school. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother is Icelandic, therefore I look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran, I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. My parents would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, the first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year. Another impressive year, I'm sure. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year, and that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We are very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves to golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time, and they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We are very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. They were actually being rather kind. Long story short, it's right about this time. And it really would take till breakfast to describe all of the incidences and events that led up to this next thing, but I'm just going to condense it all down. I'm going to condense about a year into one sentence. A really bad night happened, so I joined the Navy. It was a bad night. What I'm about to tell you should concern you if you care anything about the security of the United States. But on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. And this test that I took qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you, that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that even maybe possibly or remotely would allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that particular test. That test is called a urinalysis test, is what it's called. Never knew how to study for those things. They always surprise you with it, right? So again, long story short, I should have been kicked out of the Navy, but through a series of events, no, we'll skip that part. Through a series of events, I was allowed to stay in the Navy. And a year and a half later, I was a lower rank than when I first came in. It's kind of like this. I knew I was in the Navy. It was pretty obvious whenever I would survey my surroundings on any given day. You know, I'd look around and, by God, I am in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I'm on a large gray ship. I'm in a uniform. There is no doubt about it. I am in the United States Navy. However, that ship would pull into a port. I would leave that ship and take a drink, and I literally would forget that I'm in the Navy. And it wasn't because I meant to or was being disrespectful. It's because I'm alcoholic. What was starting to happen to me, at this point I'm 23, I'm 24, I'm 25 years old. See, throughout my life I knew how to go on 3-day runs. In fact, I love a good 3-day run. In fact, there's something about that second day of a drunk that just, it's one of the most valuable experiences a human being can have. I feel sorry for anybody that does not know how to move into that second day of a drunk. Right? When people look at me, I was like, man, you've missed out. You really have. There's a level of degrading behavior that is just completely available to you when you do that. And now I'm drifting in and out of these blackouts over 3-day periods when I start drinking, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know when it's going to start. And I got to tell you, it's a strange feeling when you come out of one of those 3-day drunks and you find yourself in a foreign country, 6 a.m. on a large pier going, there was a destroyer here the other day. Navy gets angry at that. At this point, I'd been in the Navy approximately 2 years, and I came to in a cheap motel room in downtown San Diego one more time, and I was late getting back to the ship, and my car was held together by rubber bands, and I'm trying to get back to my ship, and by this time, one of the tools for living I have is I would always save a pint, and it would be underneath the seat of my car, and as I'm driving back into the ship, and I'd done it 100 times before, is that I would drink half of that pint, knowing it was going to be a while till I could drink, and I would drink half that pint. I would keep the other half a pint underneath the seat. At noontime, I'd sneak off the ship back to my car, and I'd drink the other half a pint. It's my way of kind of sliding into Tuesday. And this particular morning, I was paying more attention to getting that half a pint in me than where the car was going. And at the front of every Navy base, there is a guard shack where Marines stand duty, and they take this job very seriously. And this is pre-9/11. The security was heavy, but nothing like it is now. And I remember I was getting that half a pint in me, then all of a sudden my eyes came into focus, and I saw the Marine had his head out of the guard shack, like, right? And I'm wondering what he's so excited about, and I tried to yank the wheel. The car hit this cement median on the right-hand side and flipped over, and bang, right through that guard shack. I can still see that Marine doing this big dive out of there. And he did this big somersault. He was back up, weapon drawn. Thank God those guys are in good shape. Right? And then it was one of those mornings where everybody's angry, and I'm stumbling around, and what? And they're all pointing at me, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Right? Just one of those. I hate those mornings. I hate when people in uniforms are angry. I just hate those mornings. And the Marine was all right there, and I was I had minor injuries, so they're patching me up at the Naval Hospital for the minor injuries, and they're reading new charges on me. And this is nothing significant. New charges, that's just what happens in a guy's life like mine about every 90 days if you're living the way I'm living. So there's nothing significant about the new charges, but the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors prescribed this stuff called Antabuse for me. Are there some Antabuse alumni around here? Yes, sirree. And now I was under orders to show up at sick bay every single morning before quarters, and I would have to sit there in a chair, stick my tongue out, and this corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for a half an hour to make sure it actually ingested in my system. Over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this thing we call alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol or drugs in my system, and I was literally going insane. I remember counting those days on that Antabuse, just... It's been 4 days, and I'm on Antabuse. Now it's been 6 days, and I'm on Antabuse. Now it's been 8 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes, and I'm on Antabuse. And I started to look around that ship. The other men, they're talking behind my back. All 300 of them. Have you ever felt that way in AA? The only difference is that in AA, we are talking behind your back. It's not an illusion. We're really doing it. I'm sure only with love and tolerance in this area of Texas. But on the 10th day, I just snapped. And I went AWOL from my ship, and I locked myself in a little hotel room in downtown San Diego. It's called the Plaza Hotel. It's on 4th and Broadway. This would have been May of 1986. And the Plaza Hotel in May of 1986 cost $13 a night. It's still there, and they have rehabbed that whole area of downtown San Diego, and the Plaza Hotel is still there. And it is now $19 a night. And I locked myself in a little hotel room, and I had a bottle of vodka and a shot glass on this rickety little end table. And as I stared at the bottle of vodka and the shot glass, I had remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of Antabuse when they had prescribed it for me. They had told me, son, you need to understand that if you drink on top of this Antabuse, you will get one of two reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die. So I remember staring at the bottle and I thought, well, wonder which reaction I'm going to get. I took one shot and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in this cracked little mirror in this hotel room, and I was bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt. I was drenched in sweat, and then all of a sudden, I was like hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. You guys are sick if you think this is funny. So I took another shot, and up it came. My late sponsor, a man named Eddie Cochran, who passed away in 1999 with 47 years of sobriety. His sobriety date was December 2nd, 1951. One of the pioneers of Southern California, Alcoholics Anonymous. He called the next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. This is a new level of puking I'm unfamiliar with, right? Because we all know normal puking, right? It's one of the tools for living we get out there, right? We all know when you're out there in the middle of a good drunk, you get that little sour taste in the back of your throat. Maybe a little bit comes up in the mouth, and it's the warning, right? You've got 30 to 60 seconds, right? Right? So you go, and in that 30 to 60 seconds, you've learned, try to look for a bathroom if there happens to be one. Right? If you're driving, we've learned our lesson. Get the window down, man. When you blow it all over the dashboard, it gets in the ventilation system. We don't need to be told twice. But, right? So we learn our lesson, but we get the warning, right? But here on Antabuse, there's no warning. It's just, ah! Sort of this Linda Blair spray across the room. Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet is in the same room with the bed. It's a design feature, I believe, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. But I found the magic of drinking on top of Antabuse, and that is that if I were to hang in there, and that's an important feature, you can't half measure it if you're going to drink on top of Antabuse. You might need to reach down for a level of commitment you don't know you have. But I found that if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking, enough of the Antabuse would kick out of my system, and I would quit throwing up. And I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating and sweating, and I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of Antabuse the last 7 months of my drinking. There's no other words to describe this other than desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a motel parking lot in an area of San Diego called National City. I was in the middle of another one of those 3-day drunks. Somewhere in the middle of the second day, I thought it was a good idea to start smoking crack cocaine. Then you're kind of on a mission, right? And the last thing I remember is there were lots of fists flying. Apparently, they were not mine. And then I remember a lot of blood going everywhere, and apparently that was mine. And the next thing I knew is I came to on an operating table. Now, we all know that when we come out of blackouts, we look at our surroundings, trying to figure out, was it a good night or bad night, right? And when I came out of that morning and saw men and women with surgical masks in their hands, surgical masks and tools in their hand, I realized, oh, this was a bad night. Right? I got to tell you also, I was a little frustrated when I got here into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to a lot of Narcotics Anonymous meetings in the beginning. I got to tell you, I was frustrated with the way you were describing coming out of your blackouts, because you guys were always saying, I am so grateful to be sober these days because I now wake up instead of coming to. It was just so horrible when I was out there getting loaded. I would come to and I'd look next to me and as if you were always the good-looking one in this equation. There's always two sides to that story, and I had been on the wrong end a few times. It'd happen to me before I'd come to and I'd see a woman that I actually liked next to me, and I'd go, oh, awesome. She'd wake up and go, oh, not Karl, no, I'm running out. My last night of drinking, I'm being let out of the San Diego jail. I'm being transferred from civilian authorities back to military authorities. Handcuffs are extra tight that morning. My neck muscles are not working well, and people are angry again. Again, another morning with angry people in uniforms. And they tried to bring me back to my ship, and that morning when they tried to bring me back to the ship, they would not allow me onto the quarterdeck. The officer of the deck put his arm up and said, "Wrong answer. Orders have already been processed on this loser. Orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment." Now I remember sitting there in handcuffs and kind of, huh? Did it happen again? While you're working on it, I can speak up. I was sitting there in handcuffs and head nodding back and forth, and apparently some sort of option was thrown out on the table. I don't remember thinking it was a good idea that I should go to treatment, but it really did not matter what I thought because I was in handcuffs. I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but my experience was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever turn to me and say, "So what's your opinion on this matter?" Right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. And they took me up to this military treatment center up in the north end of San Diego, and when the doors were locked behind me, that's when the handcuffs were taken off me. And I got to tell you, as far as I'm going to be doing this 45-day treatment, right? And I don't even really know what it is. And in the first few days of this treatment center, they are doing administrative work. They're interviewing us to find out what ship or base or command we came from. They are doing medical checkups on us to see what kind of physical condition we're in, and they're doing some group counseling in the first few days before they assign us our treatment units, they called it, right? But in the first few days, we're all gathered today, about 35 or 40 of us, 35 of us, I believe, and we're all sitting there, and somewhere, and nobody's talking. We're all in these therapy groups. We're all like arms folded, looking down at the ground. Nobody's talking, and this facilitator, I think he was new at his job, he was giving us his all. He really was. He was trying the best to get us to interact, and we're just, Somewhere late in the third day, I think, this one guy named Paco from some other base raised his hand to share in the therapy session. And he said, and the counselor goes, yes, yes, yes. And he got excited that somebody wanted to say, yes, Paco, what would you like to say? And he said, "I hear that I'm supposed to be rigorously honest with you guys if I'm going to do this staying sober thing. And I want you guys to know that Paco is not my real name. Paco is just a name I've always used whenever I get in trouble, ever since I've been a young teenager, and this looked like trouble when I got here the other day. But my real name's Randy. You'll find out anyway when my file gets here, but I'd like to let you guys, I want to be honest. My real name's Randy." We all kind of go, "All right, whatever. Nice to meet you, Randy." But this facilitator got really excited, said, "Oh my God, there's the first breakthrough of any honesty of any of you SOBs." Later that afternoon, we were all gathered up again, and they called Randy's name out, and he marched up proudly down the center, and they had made a gold name tag for him. And they slapped it on his chest, and then we were all informed whenever staff was not around, Randy's in charge. You get promoted pretty quick in this treatment thing. Now, Randy loved his job, but we all hated Randy now. We did. He starts turning you in if you're smoking out the window at midnight, right? Or you don't make your bed right, Randy's on you. After we were in this place 7 days, they took us all to our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least it was my first meeting. I'd never been to a meeting before. I did not have a prior interpretation or idea of what it was. I had heard of it. It's hard to be out there in the world and not hear of it, but I really had not given it much thought, nor had I been there. But after we'd been in there 7 days, the white vans would pull up outside the barracks there, and they'd call off names as to which van to go into, and 5 or 6 of us would be put into each van, and each van would take off to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous somewhere in the San Diego County area. And I don't know what it was. I only now have a theory as to why this next thing happened to me. In my very first meeting, I was slapped across the face with the problem and the solution. I didn't know it, but in looking back, I was. And now my theory is that, number one, maybe my ears had been tenderized a little bit by drinking on top of Antabuse for 7 months. That maybe I was in what we like to call the propitious moment, that might be a few days worth where I could hear. And the other thing is that I believe those people that were at the podium at those meetings they took us to knew that brand new people were in that room, and they were talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and the program for recovery. They were talking about the problem and the solution in a brilliant way. And I literally, we would always sit in the back. The military guys would all sit in the back. They would also brief us before they would send us to these meetings on how to behave in those meetings. They would also send an armed guard with us. It was funny. You could smoke back in those days. And we would be back there, and there were no cell phones, of course, but we would stay in our chair mainly because that armed guard would be over near the door smoking. He'd always lean back, his jacket open so you could see his weapon. So we stayed in our chair. We would stay right there. We were not getting up and running around. So what happened to me, though, while I was listening is I got this overwhelming feeling in those meetings right off the bat of, oh my God, they know. They know. Jesus, they know. Now, if you would have seen me there and saw me, saying that, you nudged me and said, okay, kid, what is it that they know that you think you know? I would have gone, I don't know. But they know, right? And it was because... It really is. There's a language that is spoken here that absolutely made sense to me. It did. It just did. I'm not one of these people that fought it. It just hit me across the face. I know I'm like one. I'm rather rare. But from the first day I got here, now I didn't know whether I'd be able to stay. That's a whole nother journey that I'm going to talk about. But from the first day, it's almost like I landed on mainland China. And for whatever reason, I understood Mandarin. It's really weird, because I'd never heard words like pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I'd never heard those words. I never sat in the bar and somebody, hey, you pitifully and incomprehensibly demoralized yet? Never had I heard, right? But when you said it in the meetings, I did not have to nudge the guy next to me and say, what do they mean by that? I knew exactly what you meant by that. After 45 days, going to let us all out of that treatment center, just what the orders were. And on the Wednesday before that Friday, they're going to let us out on a Friday. On the Wednesday before that, they gathered all 35 of us, and they put us in this room. And all of a sudden, this side door opens up, and the biggest, meanest counselor in the place came in, and he's a Marine. And that day, he's in his full dress uniform. I got to tell you, a Marine in his full dress uniform is a very impressive, very intimidating sight, and they make noise when they walk across the tile floor. And he walked across that floor, and all of us 35 were sitting there, and it just went dead silent. And he marched up to a podium, and he grabbed both sides of this podium, and he leaned over, and he stared at us. And he didn't speak right away. It felt like forever. It was probably 30 seconds. And he just panned the room and stared at us. Then he said, you 35 have been through one of the finest treatment centers in the world for alcoholism and drug addiction. We've been here for many, many years. And over the years, our statistics tell us that out of you 35, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Many of you will die, go insane, wind up in prison. Nice little exit pep talk, don't you think? Then he said, many of you relapse once, twice, maybe 20 times, and then make it back into long-term sobriety. But according to this treatment center statistics, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Man, if you thought it was quiet before he said that, you could have heard a pin drop now. The only thing you could hear was me going, shit. Because I knew if only one of us was going to make it, it was not going to be me. We all knew who it was going to be. It's going to be Randy over here, guaranteed. He's like the poster boy of the treatment center, for God's sake. Right? So on this Friday afternoon, they're letting us all out of this place, and everybody's being transferred back to their ship's base or command in various different ways. And there were 4 of us that had been arrested in vehicles the night before we were thrown into this place. So we were informed that our vehicles were in an impound lot, and they would be brought to us one at a time. So I was standing on the front doorsteps of this treatment center with a couple other sailors, and we're kind of fidgety and looking at each other. And all of a sudden, one of the guys I'm with, we're waiting for our cars to be brought to us. And all of a sudden, one of the guys I'm with points at this car coming across the parking lot, and he goes, is that Randy in that car? And we look a little closer. Yeah, sure is. And he's coming at us. And we look a little closer, and he's got a bottle already. Randy's got a bottle. He's polishing it off, right? He rolls down the window, goes right in front of us, goes, ha, 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 throws the bottle right at our feet, gives us all the finger, and he drives off. I guess his name was Paco again. I don't know. The next thing that I remember of that day is I showed up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, a 6 o'clock gong show meeting in Pacific Beach in the north end of San Diego, and I'm sitting in the back of that meeting that night at 6 p.m., and the truth about my life is I'm 45 days without a drink. I've got a lot of information, and I'm physically feeling better than I have felt since I've been a young teenager. But there had been no spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or even a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. And what was even more dangerous than that is I did not know I needed one. I described to you right when I got up here 2 components of my relationship to alcohol, that I have a physical and mental relationship to alcohol. I did not know, the book calls this the spiritual malady. I did not know that I also have a spiritual relationship to alcohol. And when I say that, what I mean is that thing that makes me me, that thing that is trying to communicate with you right now, that thing that's not part of my body, that thing that authors, poets, and musicians have been talking about forever, that entity that's us. It has a spiritual relationship to alcohol, and I could not have described what I'm talking about here until 13 years later. The best way for me to describe what I mean by that spiritual relationship to alcohol, I'm going to skip ahead 13 years. I'm going to come back to this first meeting I'm at, but I'm going to skip ahead 13 years to tell you the story of something I was facing, and I didn't even know it at the time when I was fresh out of that treatment center. 13 years later, in the year 2000, my sobriety date is January 21st, 1987. In 2000, my mother calls me up and says, Karl, your brother and his wife and kids are spending the summer in the south of France. I go, I know. And she goes, and they've got this huge villa, and they've got nannies, and they got a whole separate wing of this villa that we can have for a couple of weeks. Let's go. And I go, I'm in. And she goes, we'll stop in Iceland on the way, and we will see the family farm. We'll see this museum dedicated to your great aunt, and then we'll head down to the south of France. And I go, man, sounds like a spectacular trip. I'm in. So we go to Iceland for a week. I had a spectacular, unbelievable experience there. I've actually been back to Iceland like 7 times since 2000. You guys have been there too, and they love those people, man. Love them. And when the first time I ever went to Iceland, I just looked around and go, Jesus, everybody looks like me. It was weird. And people talked Icelandic to me because they assume I am. But anyway, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story happens in the south of France. Right, so we're there for a couple weeks, and one of the nights we're there, my brother says, Karl, you're going to drive because you don't drink, and we're all going out for a 13-course French meal. We'll have the nannies watch the kids, and you drive, and let's all go. So, indeed, I drove, and my mother and my brother and his wife, we all took off to this amazing castle in the countryside where the whole courtyard is this restaurant, and we're going to have a 13-course French meal. Now, I'd never had a 13-course French meal before that, and I've never had one since. If you've never had a 13-course French meal, what they do is they bring you a tiny little bit of food 13 times. That's what they do. Just this tiny little bit of food 13 times. That's what they do. And with each one of these little bits of food that they bring you, they bring this tiny, I mean embarrassingly small, little glass of wine. Right? And the waiter or the maitre d' will tell a story as to why that wine was paired with that food, and what vineyard that wine came from, what region that vineyard is in, and the family who has historically owned that vineyard, and the history behind that family. It's all fascinating, right? And my brother and his wife recognize a good drinking opportunity. They're trying this and doing that, and they're having a good time. We like this one. Oh, get us 2 of those. Yeah. Now me, I'm already 13 years sober, so I'm trying all the Diet Cokes of the region. And kept asking the waiter for a story about that, and he'd get embarrassed for me, like, no, monsieur. Now, my mother, she is an expert at not drinking. She can look like she's drinking, but she doesn't, right? She just sips, and she pushes it away and carries on her conversation. She has done this her whole life. Even now at 91, she's had a spectacular life and career. Even at 91, she gets these Lifetime Achievement Awards in the last 10 years, and she does the same thing. She just sort of takes a sip, smiles, and moves it over. And I've known this about her. And she did the same kind of thing that day. She told the waiter, don't even bother bringing all those little glasses. I'm not going to be drinking them. You know, I already tried one, and I'm done. And I go, Mom, come on, have a little more. I'm driving, for God's sake. Have a little more. And she goes, no, I don't like the way it makes me feel, Karl. Now, I should have left well enough alone. I really should have just carried on the conversation. But that day, I decided to ask the $1 million question. Mom, how does it make you feel? And she said something that was fascinating to me. She said the following: "Well, Karl, I'm here having a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I am here looking at the spectacular colors of the French countryside at sunset. And those colors are so rich and beautiful that I can't even put words to it. But they speak to my soul, Karl. And the music is rattling my bones. That string quartet over there, Karl, is just amazing. And I'm here talking with 3 of the people I love the most in the world. And Karl, if I were to add a little bit too much alcohol, the colors will start to get dull and blurry. And the music will start to sound shallow and off in the distance. And I'll have a very hard time keeping a conversation going with you." Do you get that? That's fundamentally the opposite relationship to alcohol that I have. Because what she's saying is that of and by herself, she can see the colors of life. She can hear the music, and she can connect with God's other kids. And if she adds a little bit too much alcohol, it all gets dull, blurry, and sloppy. You see, me, of and by myself, I cannot see the colors. I cannot hear the music, and you are goddamn boring. You give me 4 or 5 drinks and, oh, do you see those colors? Oh my God, it's like an artist is painting. Oh. And the music, I'll tell you where that cello was made, whether I know or not. I can make up the name of a German village like that. And you become very interesting, but not as interesting as me. It's no wonder she wouldn't go to the gates of insanity or death for that. And then I look over at my brother and his wife, and you know, alcohol is important to them. Always has been. But they've been able to stop or moderate. But that day they're going, ha, 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 they're giggly and they're getting a little goofy. And I go, is that what happens to you guys? And they go, yeah, but we like sloppy and blurry sometimes. We like to escape. And I go, oh, you're trying to escape. I'm trying to join. He's a certain type of hard drinker that can stop or moderate given sufficient reason. But you see, alcohol and drugs is the breath of life for me. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. And you keep taking it away from me and telling me I can't have it. And all I'm left with is a very dark and bleak and frustrating world. And I don't know how to tell you that. Throughout my life, when you put me in front of counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, I didn't know how to say that. If I would have had the vocabulary back when people used to like confront me and they'd always try to take alcohol away from me and put me in front of some sort of psychologist or therapist, well-meaning, or a pastor, and they'd basically say this, sometimes aggressively, sometimes passionately, or, you know, gently. Like the police were always aggressive, like, what's the matter with you? Right? If I could have had the words, I would have said, yes, I know. I know it looks like the price for my drinking is getting rather high. I agree with you. I'm not happy. The car is on fire either. I see why you're concerned. But if I would have had the vocabulary, I would have followed it up with, but if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I'm willing to pay that price. I didn't know that I was facing that when I was sitting in the back of that meeting with 45 days. I've been separated from alcohol, and I've got information, and I had no idea that sooner or later I was going to have a drastic rearrangement of my attitudes and ideas towards life, or I'm not staying. And I'm convinced that's what Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps are designed to do. They are to create that experience in somebody like me to where I can see the colors of life, I can hear the music of life, and I can connect with God's other kids without a drink. Otherwise, I'm out. It's my belief also. What Alcoholics Anonymous is we have learned how to mass produce that. See, throughout history, if you look at a little history of AA, how many people know a little bit of history of AA, right? Really, I encourage you to know more than just Bill and Bob. You should really fundamentally know, who Dr. Silkworth was, Ebby Thatcher, Roland Hazard. To be around a 12-step recovery and not know that at least know that about our history, it would be sort of like claiming to be a Christian and after a couple of years saying, Mary? There's somebody named Mary involved. Really? Who knew? What part did she play? Right? That'd be kind of silly. One of the most valuable things is when I learned about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got this profound sense of belonging and a sense of gratitude that I get to live in this time frame of mankind. Throughout history, and it's discussed in our history when Roland Hazard is interacting with Carl Jung, and Carl Jung says, I misdiagnosed you. Sorry, that year of therapy was kind of a waste. Sorry, you're a chronic alcoholic, and I can't do anything for you. I'm summarizing and being a little dramatic here, but that's kind of how it went. And Roland goes, is there no exceptions? And Carl Jung said something very interesting. He said, well, yes, I've heard of these. I've never seen it myself, but I have heard and read about that throughout history, alcoholics of your type would have a vital spiritual awakening, a rearrangement of attitudes and ideas towards life. It's sort of, boom. And indeed, throughout history of mankind, every once in a while, one of us would just poof, get sober, kind of like a stray kernel of popcorn. Just poof, we'd get sober, right? And the town would, let's say Joe, the town drunk, got sober. Poof, right? Sober. The whole town would go, Joe, you're sober. He'd go, poof, I am. Joe, what happened? I don't know. Joe, you got to come help my son. You got to help my wife. She's a drunk too. And Joe's going, I don't even know what happened to me. I can't help. So now Joe's sober, but he's useless, right? Not only is he useless, he's a bad example to the rest of us drunks in town. Because now our families are saying, why don't you be like Joe, right? So I guarantee you a lot of Joes got found floating down the river. We got to get rid of Joe. He's a bad example. What happened in 1935 is through a series of miraculous and spectacular events, they have learned how to mass produce that rearrangement of attitudes and ideas. We have learned how to do that. We know what happened to Joe there. We know how to mass produce that. We know how to, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Meaning we can mass produce it in the same way that prior to the Model T Ford and Henry Ford, only the rich, not only the rich, only the uber rich could have an automobile. After they came up with the assembly line and mass production, the common man could have it. And indeed that is true here. In the annals of alcoholism, this is phenomenal. That we have learned how to mass produce that spiritual awakening, that rearrangement of attitudes and ideas. I had no idea sitting there in the back of that meeting that night. One guy that night, I'm sitting in the back of that meeting, came up to me and he was lurking around the back of the meeting, operating on his primary purpose, and he came up to me and he said, hey, never seen you before. What are you doing? He said it rather aggressively and scared me. If you startle me, I sometimes tell you the truth. And he goes, never seen you before. What are you doing? And so I said, I don't know. I just got out of the Navy Treatment Center a couple hours ago. I don't know what I'm doing. This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face. At the break of the meeting, he's like fighting his friends up. He's mine, get away. My newcomer, mine. Now, I didn't know it, but there was something going on in that guy's life that particular night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. So he was wondering what he was going to do with his weekend. Homicide, suicide, get loaded or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. This guy was insane over this woman. In between this barrage of meetings he dragged me to, he threw me in the passenger side of his car. He started driving and he started to yell. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like an AA radar car that just made it to the next meeting, right? And he'd be yelling at me, you gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, you gotta get a sponsor. Damn her! Gotta go to meetings, gotta read it, damn it! Like, the guy was almost spitting on me. Now, I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that that guy, that night, in his pain, was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had done the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore, he understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. I am so glad that that guy, that night in his pain that night, was not at home underneath his covers, whining into his sponsor's answer machine. If you are 25 years old or younger, an answering machine is this box that used to sit on the kitchen counter. So glad he was not at home whining into his sponsor's answering machine. Sponsor, where are you? Fix me! Give me the golden answer. The secret around here is not trying to find the perfect sponsor. It's learning how to be of service. Yes, find, man, if you got somebody like Ruff, or you got somebody like Chris, or you got somebody like Tina, or all sorts of the other people as sponsors, fantastic. But I hate to say it, that's not your solution. And I know they know they're just trying to teach you to find your solution, because that's how this guy had obviously been sponsored. Obviously, this guy's sponsor had said, yes, son, I most certainly will try to be there for you, guide you through the 12 steps, give you what ideas and experience that I have. But son, if you learn to work with others, you will have a lifetime of solutions at your fingertips. And that guy was acting that out on me. He didn't know whether I would stay sober or not, and he might not have cared. He only cared about that woman, right? I was just a prop in his weekend so he didn't do something stupid. I'm glad I could be of service to him. Right? I got back from that weekend, and the one guy, I got back to my ship, and the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous on my ship was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. And I got to tell you, he had 14 months, and he was again perfect. He was the only guy on my ship that was sober, so I didn't have much of a choice. But you know what? He had fallen in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had a sponsor, and the sponsor had a sponsor, and he came from a good lineage, and he had commitments, and he was doing everything he could. He was working steps. I was going to be the first one he was working with, and he had caught fire with Alcoholics Anonymous in a way that I was going to have to jump overboard to get away from him. He was excited that this new guy he felt I was gold being delivered to him on a silver platter. Most of my first 2 years of sobriety I spent as a nomad, because the ship was up and down all the way from northern Alaska all the way down to Central America. We were hunting Russian submarines, and we would pull in. We would be out at sea for 30 and 60 days at a time. We would be in port for a few days. We would find meetings. But when we were out at sea, my first sponsor, Bob, made me meet him in this little battery shop down at the bottom of the engine room. And he, like on the fourth time, he came in with that blue book, and he tossed it down on the table. He said, I've been hounding you about it for weeks. Have you read it? And I said, yeah. There's like how it works. We antagonists. Some doctor has an opinion about something. And again, remember, he is no expert at working with others. And he opened up that book and he started to read. And when he was tired, I would read. And he shared what little he knew. And it was enough. When I look back at that experience, us two in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on the USS Cushing, DD 985, in this little engine room, two men trying to save our lives, blind leading the blind with a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe it's Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form. Neither one of us knew what we were doing. Neither one of us knew what was going to happen, but we were trying our best. 2 years sober, got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. That is a result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, an apparently merciful God, and a personnelman that lost half my file. That's how that happened. And one of the amends I was unable to make while I was still in the Navy was that my parents had paid for that bachelor's degree. Remember when they sent me to school for more than 3 years? And I either had to pay them back every single nickel, or I had to go get what they paid for in the first place. So when I got out of the Navy in 1988, I was 2 years sober. Got sober in 87, so late 88, I was almost 2 years sober when I got out, and I packed everything I owned into I was still push starting the same car I got sober in, a little 68 Volkswagen with a hole in the floorboard, got a push start, right? And I packed everything in there, and I moved to this town called Covina, where I'd chosen a university to use some VA benefits to go to school. And on my way up, I started to think, I'm putting along on the LA freeways, right? Nice cars are blowing by me and honking at me like, loser, loser! At least that's what I thought they were saying. And I started to think, I need a life. I've heard people talk about that in meetings, that they have lives. I need one of those. And God, I'm 2 years sober. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to work. I need a life. I'm not going to have much chance to go to meetings. I'll go when I can. But I need a life. I need to go get a life. And I was about ready to make a fatal decision. My first sponsor had to stay in the Navy, had 2 more years to do, and the ship was heading to Asia. And we didn't have cell phones, so I was going to have to get a new sponsor, but that was not my thinking. My thinking was, I need a life. I need to go to school. I need to work. But I'll stop by the local meeting hall to see where the meeting is in case I need one. That's what I was thinking. So I pull into this parking lot of what we call the 502 Club, the San Gabriel Valley Alano Club, and I go to a noon meeting. I was discouraged right off the bat because it's a flat parking lot, and one of the tools for living when you push start your car is you need help. I mean, you like a little incline, right? And I go into this noon meeting, and a gentleman was making coffee, walked over to me. He had a medallion that said 1951. I knew what that meant. That meant he was 10 years sober when I was born, for God's sake. And he walked over to me, and he said the exact same thing that guy said to me when I was fresh out of that treatment center, but he said it much more gently. He didn't startle me. He goes, "Hello, son. Never seen you here before. What you doing?" And I had a much better answer this time. I said, "Sir, it's very nice to see your meeting hall here. I am 2 years sober. I'm fresh out of the United States Navy. I'm going to be going to school and working. You won't see me very often. I'm going to be real busy." Funny, that's what he did. He laughed. And he said, "Oh, son, school and work, that's wonderful. But that's what we do in between meetings, son." And he got kind of stern on me, tilted his head. And then what he was really giving me is one of the messages to long-term sobriety comfortably. And what he was really saying is, "Son, you need to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and visit the world. Please do not try to hash it out there in the world and visit Alcoholics Anonymous when convenient." It's one of the most important things that has ever been told to me. I decided to follow that man, and the very first thing he told me to do was to put new guys in my car, told me my life would get better. I didn't see how that could happen, but all right, you were 10 years sober when I was born, I'll give it a shot. And the very first night that I followed his direction and put new guys in my car, my life got better. They could push start my car. Didn't he say how much better? He just said better, for God's sake. Oh. Look, I'll finish it with a couple of stories here. Sometime in, this can really sum up everything that's happened to me. In 1998, I was asked to come and do this down in Nogales, Arizona. And it's back when, before people had cell phones, you just carry pagers. Remember pagers, right? Remember when people used to 911 page you and then say, "Just want to talk to you." Remember that? Like irritating, slap them, right? Anyway, and I had to go do this, and I called my mom before I left because, yeah, you're supposed to have nationwide coverage, but I figured but there were blackout areas in the country where your pager wouldn't work. I didn't want to worry my mother if she tried to page me, so I called my mom before I left. "Mom, I'm going to be in Nogales, Arizona over the weekend. If you try to page me, don't worry." She goes, "Oh, Nogales? Oh, you need to get a hold of Don and Leona. They would love to hear from you." And I go, "What? Remind me who they are." "Oh, that's right, Carl. You haven't seen them since you were 9 years old. That you're lifelong friends. Don was the best man at your father's and my wedding." Oh, yes, I know exactly who you're. Of course, I know who you're talking about. And so I called him up. Love to come up and see you. He goes, "Oh, bring your golf clubs. I know you love to golf." I was like, that's kind of weird. I mean, it's true. I'm like a golf whore. I'll golf with anybody at any time for any reason. I don't even need to know your name. I will golf with you. But how does he know that? It's weird. So I brought my golf clubs, and I left the conference Saturday morning. I drove up, and I met him at his golf club, and we started to walk along playing. And as we're walking along, he started to ask me very specific, pertinent questions about my life. He knew what school I had graduated from. He knew what my degree was in. He knew that I had worked for General Electric for years. He knew about these recovery homes. He just knew everything about my life. And by the fourth hole, I go, "Don, this is confusing to me. I haven't seen you since I was 9 years old. But you seem to know an awful lot about my life. How is that?" And he goes, "Oh, Carl, that's so easy. Every year your mother writes that Christmas letter." I'm like, yes! Finally, I got in that thing. If nothing else happened, that's good enough, right? 17 years sober, I got married. We have 2 beautiful kids. The marriage did not work out. I know you've never heard of that. But we had a really important errand, urgent errand. When we realized we could not live together, we had to figure out how to be good co-parents. She loves those kids. She's a good mother. And I need to treat her like that. And we've been divorced for over 10 years now. But I learned something really something that I never had experienced before in life. Those kids, Madison and Ryan, if you're a Facebook friend of mine, you're kind of sick of the pictures. I put up a lot of pictures of them. It's like this, I'd never felt this level of love for another human being ever. I had never touched that. it's like I met who I would die for. I've never felt that. I mean, I know the Navy made me raise my hand and say I would die for you, but I was really hoping it was not going to come to that, right? But with my kids, it's just like, yeah, if it comes to that, yes. Right? And I love other people, right? I love Chris. I now love Ruff. I do. Really love you guys. But if we're out at Starbucks later and some guy comes in wielding a gun saying, one of you's got to go, I would say, have you met my friend Ruff? But my kids, it's like, I've never felt. See, the reason I bring this up, I would never trade my kids for the first drink. Never in a million years. However, I am alcoholic. I know what it means to be alcoholic. Although I would never trade them for the first drink, I would trade them for the second drink like that. Therefore, there is nothing more important if I want to be a good father, which is what is in the forefront of my mind every day. For me to be a good father, I need to stay in the center of the world of recovery. I need to center my life from here. From there, I get a really good chance to swing the bat and maybe hit a home run, maybe bat a couple of singles, maybe strike out a couple of times in being a good father. But without that, I don't even get a chance to put a bat in my hands and step in the box. And that's what I'm so grateful for. I have had a deep and profound rearrangement of my attitude and outlook towards life, and it's directly because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys. Thank you very much.